Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another sports stuff video. Today, we're doing an updated predicting 2026 coaches into their teams. So this is week 15, right? It is Monday, December 15th. Week 15 has concluded. Week 16 is coming up. There are 3 weeks left of the season, meaning that I am officially 3 weeks away from Black Monday, where NFL coaches get fired and NFL coaches that are hoping to get promoted to, obviously being a head coach, like, whether they're offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, special team coaches that want to get promoted, they are going to want to, wait for 3 weeks and see who gets fired and see what jobs open up. So again, I already did this video earlier in the season, but I am doing an updated version. I realized I had the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. This is an updated version from earlier in the season, because I did it, I believe, after 4 or 5 weeks. I did this, so it's been 10 weeks. It's been 2.5 months. I wanted an updated prediction of teams that will, 1, fire their head coach, and 2, putting together coaching staffs for that team. Now, I'm not going in depth of, like, position coaches. I'm just doing head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and special team coach. So if you guys enjoy, please do like, comment, subscribe. If you love this in-depth analysis and prediction of the NFL world, please give me a follow. I try and do this, again, every single year. You can look back at my past NFL playlists. Every single year, I do in-depth off-season plans for all 32 teams. That is free agency, that is cap space maneuverability, that is drafting, going in-depth how I can fix each team. So right now, it's just coaches, no players. Just what coaches are gonna get fired and how I would replace them. So let's start off. Number 1, obviously, is gonna be head coaches. Mike McCarthy to the Tennessee Titans. This has been my number 1 mock spot the entire season. This has been what I think is gonna be the most perfect hire, because Mike McCarthy is exactly what the Tennessee Titans need. Someone to come in, stabilize a franchise, and put in place a culture. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. He has a winning record of 60.8%. That is 174 wins to 112 losses. And it just feels like Tennessee is going to go a veteran head coach this time around. They tried with Callahan. They tried to, try and get a young guy and try and go be forward thinking. It didn't work out. Guy who's never been a head coach before. Shocker, was not that great, and a team who's very impatient post Mike Vrabel wanted to move on from him. I think Mike McCarthy is the exact hire they need. He can come in, stabilize a franchise, and I truly believe that Cam Ward can be a Dak Prescott type of quarterback. Gunslinger who on the move can make throws and makes crazy passes that you're shocked can get to a wide receiver, make any throw on the field. That's Cam Ward, and that's Dak Prescott. Mike McCarthy, before he went to Dallas, Dak Prescott was a good quarterback, right? He was a good quarterback. Was he a top 5, top 6 viewed quarterback, though, where he's a Pro Bowler every year, an All-Pro, throwing for 350 yards a game, 3 touchdowns? Like, that wasn't Dak Prescott. It wasn't his game. Mike McCarthy gets there, develops a passing game, develops Dak Prescott. Now, he was in the MVP conversation 2 or 3 years ago, and he's going for over 350 a game, 3 touchdowns, throwing him George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb and getting $65 million. Like, he has become a different quarterback because of Mike McCarthy, and I do think Cam Ward can benefit from that. So Cam Ward, I think he's praying for Mike McCarthy. Next, we have the Bengals. I do think Zach Taylor is going to get fired. All the comments from Joe Burrow in the last week or 2 have been very frightening if you're the coaching staff and the owner. So my replacement for Zach Taylor is Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh, he's a great defensive coordinator. He got dealt a tough hand in New York. For only a year or 2, it was really his team, and they handed the keys to Aaron Rodgers, and him and Robert Saleh didn't really mesh well, and Robert Saleh got canned. When he was in New York, he had a top 10 defense during that time, and when he goes to the Bengals, he inherits a top 10 offense with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Like, you inherit the best trio of wide receiver and quarterbacks in the league. So all you have to do as a defensive head coach is fix the defense, and that's what he did with the New York Jets. He fixed their defense, and he did the exact same thing with the Cincinnati Bengals. And then any offensive coordinator in the league will want to come work for the Bengals because you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. That, after 2 years, you're going to be in head coach conversations. Like, just straight up, that's what's going to happen. And I think Robert Saleh is the exact voice the Bengals need. A hard-nosed head coach, someone who can activate this fan base, activate this locker room that looks like it's in disrepair because of awful seasons. Robert Saleh in San Francisco this year, no Dre Greenlaw, no Talanoa Hufanga, no Travarius Ward, because they all left in free agency last year. Then loses Nick Bosa, loses Fred Warner, and loses Mikael Williams, their first-round pick, to ACL tears. All 3 of them. And guess what? Still a top 12 defense. With all those injuries, they are still churning out wins, still churning out great defensive performances. Robert Saleh is a great defensive coordinator, knows how to call a game, and I just think is the exact voice needed for the Cincinnati Bengals. Next, we have the Giants. So I actually am going to go an unknown hire in Frank Smith. Frank Smith has been Miami offensive coordinator the last 4 years. 3 of the last 4 years, the Dolphins have had a top 10 rushing offense. And listen, Jackson Dart would thrive in a run-first offense that is all about elusiveness and thumping. Like, Devon Achane is a great running back. Yes, I'm all for it. But that offensive line is horrid. And Frank Smith, who is not only the run game coordinator, but also the offensive coordinator, has gotten that offense to run no matter the quarterback. Now, yes, Mike McDaniel deserves a lot of the credit. He's the play caller, yada, yada, yada. But Frank Smith is right there. And not only did the Giants, I don't know why why did I say divisional rival? The Giants in the NFC. I don't know why it's a divisional rival in that. But top 10 rushing offense the last 3 or 4 years. Jackson Dart at Ole Miss was a very good rushing offense that off of play action let Jackson Dart take those deep balls. I think that's exactly what the Giants need. You have Cam Scatterbo, you have Teron Tracy, you have Malik Neighbors, you have Wan'Dale Robinson. You probably got to draft a wide receiver either in the first and second round this year to complement those guys. That is an offense that I can get excited about. And we've seen him churn out good offenses without a good offensive line. The Giants have a better offensive line than the Dolphins, right? It's straight up, they have a better offensive line. They have a franchise left tackle, a good center. They know what they're doing on the offensive line in the next year or two. And I think Frank Smith is the exact guy to get the most out of this team year one. And again, the last 3 of the 4 years, top 10 rushing offense without a horrid offensive line. That's impressive. Next, we have Brian Flores to the Ravens. I do still think John Harbaugh is going to get fired. And I don't know what it is in my system. I think especially if they miss the playoffs, I just think John Harbaugh, the last 5 years, has been saved by Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson this year is either fed up or he's, just sick of it. And I just don't think he's playing to his best. I think the team is clocked out of this season right now. Yes, they want to win, but you lose to the Steelers last week. You beat up on the really bad Bengals, obviously, but you lose to the Steelers last week. That was the game to basically choose a division. Now, yes, there's 3 more games in the season, but that was the one, in my opinion, I'm like, you got to win that. You have to win it. And they lost it. In my opinion, Brian Flores is the best defensive coordinator in the game. He has a solid head coaching record of 24-25 with a rebuilding Dolphins team. He was fired due to non-football stuff. It was off the field. Didn't want to tank on purpose. Didn't want to take Tua Tagovailoa. And it was too much infighting in the front office and ownership. They fired Brian Flores. He sued them, yada, yada. We all know about it. I do think he's going to be a head coach any day now. And listen, Brian Flores and his blitz-heavy schemes, imagine that with Kyle Hamilton. Imagine that with Nate Wiggins. Imagine that with Alohi Gilman. That is an elite secondary blitzing group right there. And I think the Ravens, obviously, Zach Orr has been a mediocre defensive coordinator. Started the year off really bad. Has gotten better as the season's progressed. But Brian Flores is 100 levels better than Zach Orr. Imagine this defense with Brian Flores. And then you let the offense do it. Because again, when you're the Ravens, you have Lamar Jackson. Any offensive coordinator can make that offense work. But Brian Flores can make that defense the best it can be. And I think that he is the cream of the crop on the defensive side of the ball. I think the Ravens have the best chance of saying, hey, Brian, come here. That's just me, though. Next, we have Clint Kubiak to the Arizona Cardinals. I like Jonathan Gannon as a defensive coordinator. He's not been a good head coach the last 3 years, though. He's not been good. The NFL is a not-for-long league. I think Jonathan Gannon, day one, the minute he's fired, is a defensive coordinator somewhere. But I just think that Clint Kubiak is a better talent, projection than what we've seen out of Jonathan Gannon. So Jonathan Gannon, I do think he's going to get fired at the end of the year. Drew Petzing has cost him his job, and Clint Kubiak can walk in and say, hey, I'm here for the Cardinals, right? The Cardinals, they have a lot of really good talent on the offside of the ball. You have Paris Johnson. You have a couple of offensive linemen that you really like as well. You have Trey McBride, the best tight end in the league right now. You have an okay run game when healthy. You have wide receivers that you believe in. Lot is there for Clint Kubiak to work with. The only issue is quarterback. But Clint is one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. I will say, the last 2 years, his offense has started out red hot, top 5, top 3, top 2 in the league, and they flamed out both years. Now, his quarterbacks have been Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, and Spencer Rattler. Not the cream of the crop quarterback options. But, these we talked about how they flamed out later in the season. But you switch from a defensive head coach to an offensive head coach in Arizona. They've been multiple defensive head coaches in a row now, whether it was Steve Wilkes, Jonathan Gannon. Who was before Jonathan Gannon? It wasn't Steve Wilkes. But like at least 2 in the last 6 years has been defensive head coaches. You got to get someone who's on the offensive side of the ball. And I think Clint Kubiak, one, it's a Kubiak. That's going to be enough to get anyone in the league on your side. And 2, has had a top 5 offense for a majority of last 2 seasons. That's impressive as well. And then obviously bringing Clint to draft a quarterback, whether it's in this year's draft or maybe I've been airing it out there. Maybe Kyler Murray to the Indianapolis Colts for Anthony Richardson and a 2nd-round pick. That way, you get Anthony Richardson and Jacoby Brissett in the quarterback room. You have them battle out for quarterback 1. But maybe Clint Kubiak can get the most out of Anthony Richardson, right? Maybe that's an option. Or he runs with Jacoby Brissett and just lets Jacoby for a season do his thing. And in 2027, this team goes all in on a quarterback. Multiple options available for the Arizona Cardinals. And then Clint Kubiak is the offensive guy to get that quarterback for you on the roll. Next, we have a shocker. It's a shocker. The Pittsburgh Steelers fire Mike Tomlin, or Mike Tomlin leaves the Steelers on his own accord, and Jesse Minter takes over as a head coach. He has had a top 10 defense the last 2 years, and he has lackluster defensive line play in spite of it. Like this defensive line, yes, Tuli Tuipulotu has been really good this year. I want to make sure I give him his flowers. Tuli Tuipulotu has been very good this year. But outside of that, the D tackle and other edge spot have been a revolving door, it feels like. You know, Khalil Mack was injured. They trade for Odafe Owe. Odafe Owe hasn't really turned in anything. The linebacker core has been hit or miss. The secondary, outside of Tarpeed Still, the last 2 years has been hit or miss. Obviously, you have Derwin James. But overall, this defense has been very, very poor in talent. And Jesse Minter has churned out 2 top 10 defenses. I genuinely don't think he'll choose Michigan over the NFL. Yes, Michigan's a very interesting job in college, but NFL head coach is better than any single college coach position. On top of it being the Pittsburgh Steelers, where you're going to get a very long leash like Mike Tomlin has, you're going to get 5, 6, 7 years to really get what you want in Pittsburgh. And if you can't turn out winning seasons after that time, you'll be let go. But he's a younger voice for an offensive staff too. Jesse Minter is a very forward thinker, and he will hire forward thinkers. And that's what I have faith in for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because if you look at their fan base, the number one complaint that they have is that they're not modern in the NFL. You have Arthur Smith, you had Matt Canada, like awful offensive coordinators under Mike Tomlin the last couple of years. I think Jesse Minter will go younger, like 35 to 40-year-old, whether it's a Clay Kubiak, a Jim Bob Cooter, someone who is a younger side of more modern NFL versus the older NFL like Arthur Smith and Matt Canada. Now, obviously, with Mike Tomlin being fired from the Steelers, or he left the Steelers, where would Mike Tomlin go? I think there is one spot in the NFL Mike Tomlin would go, and that's the Atlanta Falcons. So I think how this would happen is Mike Tomlin or the Steelers, they move on. Black Monday, they move on. Tuesday, the Atlanta Falcons fire Raheem Morris, and Mike Tomlin's in the building, and no matter what they're gonna do, they're gonna follow the Rooney rules. They're gonna interview the 5 or 6 guys they have to interview, but they're telling Mike Tomlin, you are staying in Atlanta. We are buying you a hotel room for 2 weeks, and you are sleeping in that hotel room for 2 weeks while we do this Rooney rule crap. And guess what? You're our next head coach. He consistently churns out wins. This Atlanta Falcons team needs to get back on a winning path. They have a great roster in place for Mike Tomlin, very young roster as well with young talent, and that's the one thing Mike Tomlin can't get is young talent because he keeps churning out winning seasons. He can't get a top 10 pick to get a Bijan Robinson, to get a Drake London, to get a Michael Penix, to get a James Pierce, to get a Jalen Walker. They're always picking from 20 to 32. Like, he can't pick in the top 15. So they can't get those blue chip prospects, and they still churn out winning season after one another. So Mike Tomlin to Atlanta. Again, Black Monday, Mike Tomlin would either leave the franchise or he'll get fired, or it'll probably be a mutual split, for PR reasons. And then on Tuesday, Raheem Morris would be fired and Mike Tomlin would be interviewed Tuesday night. And then they would keep him in Atlanta for a week before they could legally sign him. Like, it makes too much sense. I think it's a great fit. And it makes too much sense in my mind. So, as you can see, those are all the head coaches I think are going to be moved on from and who they're going to get replaced with. What are the coordinators looking like? So, sorry. Guys are turning the team. I apologize. I skipped one. So, these are guys that are in NFL head coaching talks, but I don't think get promoted. So, Joe Brady with the Bills. Again, it feels like a byproduct of Josh Allen rather than Joe Brady's offense. Honestly, they're making the offense work, but I think most people would agree that no one actually thinks it's a Joe Brady offense for their success. They think it's Josh Allen. Clint Kubiak, the team has fallen apart this year. I don't think they clear house this offseason because of new ownership. I do think next year, if they have a repeat of this year, you could see Dan Quinn get fired in year 3. And that would then mean Clint Kubiak, for an interim head coaching job, could try and earn the job throughout the year for the Commanders. So I think he's going to stay in Washington. I think he likes it. And again, if they suck again next year, Dan Quinn will get fired, and Clint Kubiak could be the interim head coach for a bit, see if he wants to have that job in Washington, and then in 2027, he can either stay with Washington Commanders as the head coach or move on. Chris Shula, it's hard to not include him. They have a great defense with an awful back 7, but I just don't think he's going to be higher than Jesse Minter, who's doing more with less, versus, the Rams, who have Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Byron Young. Like, they have a great talent on the defensive side of the ball in the front 4, and that's what you want to win. That's how you win football games. So Chris Shula is going to get interviewed a lot, but I just don't think he's going to get a job. Same with Vance Joseph. Top 2 defense. They lead the league in sacks. I see more as a Steve Spagnuolo long-term DC in Denver rather than a head coaching gig. That's how I feel. Matt Nagy, no. And wow, why am I blanking on his name? He's Morton. No, I'm blanking on his name. The Ravens offensive coordinator. He's just not a head coach in my mind. He's a solid offensive coordinator, not built for head coach in the NFL. I do think he'll land on another staff elsewhere as like a senior assistant, or even get an offensive coordinating job somewhere else. But I just don't see him as a head coach in the NFL. So he will be returning to either the Ravens as the offensive coordinator for Lamar, or they'll be moving on from him. All right. So we're now putting together the staffs of these newly revamped teams. So guessing potential offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, and special team coaches for the new head coaches. This is what I got put together. So for the Titans, Mike McCarthy's offensive head coach. I have Scott Tolzien, the offensive coordinator, Aiden Durr, the defensive coordinator / assistant head coach, and John Fassel, the special teams coordinator. So Scott Tolzien served as a QB coach under Mike McCarthy in Dallas and has followed Kellen Moore to New Orleans as a quarterback coach. Obviously, he's well liked by the McCarthy tree. Kellen Moore, has taken him from Dallas to New Orleans because the McCarthy tree, that's just, Moore is from McCarthy, and so is Tolzien. They like each other. They trust each other. And I think Mike McCarthy would want someone familiar with his scheme as his number 2 on the offside of the ball for Cam Ward. Aiden Durr was a D-line coach under Mike McCarthy, and when Dan Quinn was defensive coordinator, that was his D-line coach. And then he followed Dan Quinn to Washington and is currently serving as the defensive coordinator. You can give him the defensive coordinator and assistant head coaching role to make it legal, because you can't do a lateral move. It has to be promotion from one staff to another. So you have to give him that assistant head coaching gig to make it legal. Then John Fassel, the special team coordinator. He is actually currently the special team coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. So John Fassel can be the whisper in McCarthy's ear of like, hey, this is what the organization likes. This is what the owners want to hear. And this is what Cam Ward is if you want this job. Then he can be the link to the Titans ownership of saying, hey, Mike McCarthy's a great guy. Here's how he coaches. Here's how he talks to his quarterback, his offense, his defense. Here's the type of leader he is. And, it can just be a clear line of communication through John Fassel from Mike McCarthy to Titans ownership. And I think he would keep John Fassel on as special teams coordinator. Then for the Giants, obviously, Frank Smith is going to be the head coach. As I said earlier in the video, Eric Studsville will be the offensive coordinator, Jason Tarver, the defensive coordinator, and Darius Swinton, the special teams coach. So, Eric has been Frank's run game coach and running back coach all 4 years in Miami. He's been the main guy that helps him game plan their elite run game, and that's kind of the main reason he's coming over to the New York Giants, is for their run game and how to get that play action pass off of their elite run game. He has a long history of winning in the NFL. He won Super Bowl Super Bowl 50 with Denver 10 years ago. He's a holdover from Brian Flores' staff that stayed on through his elite knowledge and his experience in the NFL. I think he's going to be a main ally for Frank's first time as a head coach, and kind of a QB whisperer and offensive whisperer for the young guys in the room on the Giants team. Jason Tarver is a longtime NFL coach with both defensive coordinator and linebacker coach experience. He's been a linebacker coach in Cleveland since 2020, and has developed, from guys that were first-round talents all the way to undrafted guys in the starters like Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, Mac Wilson, Sione Takitaki, Carson Swessinger, who's going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Just want to make sure it's known. second-round pick, defensive rookie of the year because of Jason Tarver. Mohamed Diabate and Devin Bush, in my opinion, being his magnum opus. Former first-round pick, was a complete bust and viewed as a bust in the NFL world. Now is a Pro Bowl level linebacker. That's his magnum opus. He can be a steady hand at defensive coordinator and get the most out of a good linebacker room in New York. There's a lot of good linebackers in New York, whether it's veterans like Bobby Okereke or younger guys that they've drafted in the last 2 years. I like the linebacker room in New York, and I think Jason Tarver, again, has shown he can develop young talent and has been a defensive coordinator before. It makes a lot of sense for the Giants to go after Jason Tarver. If the Brown staff is all fired, or two, I think Jason Tarver is going to get poached. He's a really good coach. And I think if you can develop the defensive rookie of the year, you're going to get looks in the NFL world. Darius Swinton, he was a special teams coach in Denver with Eric, so they have familiarity. Eric Studsville and Darius Swinton were on that 2013 and 2014 staff under John Fox with Peyton Manning. Eric Studsville was the only one that stayed in 2015, though. Darius Swinton was fired. So they have familiarity, though. He's a longtime special teams coach who's been a part of a lot of great units in the last 20 years. Currently, he's the interim in Las Vegas because of all the firings that have happened. So he's currently coaching in the NFL. So it will be easy to nab him because, once the season's over, he's not really under contract with the Raiders anymore. Another experienced NFL voice for a first-time head coach. And the Giants, currently their special teams coach is one of the best in the league. So they could retain him, but I think he's going to get poached by a better team. And Darius Swinton's a great replacement for a great Giants special teams player base. Then for the Bengals, Robert Saleh, head coach, awesome. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's going to be a great head coaching job for him. But Clay Kubiak is going to be, in my opinion, the offensive coordinator that follows Robert Saleh. Since Mike McDaniel's not going to get fired. He's a great mind on the offensive side of the ball. He is overshadowed by Kyle Shanahan, though. The Kubiak brand runs deep in the NFL, and Clay is another guy that I think is a really good offensive coordinator that is getting overshadowed by a great offensive head coach. So he's currently the OC in San Francisco, so you have to give him that assistant head coaching tag. But it showed that he can keep an offense steady with Mac Jones and a forward placement wide receiver core. You have Kendrick Bourne and parts of Juwan Jennings, playing. But mainly the fact that Kendrick Bourne and Mac Jones for 4 or 5 weeks, where it's one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the NFL, with patchwork offensive line. Clay Kubiak kept the offense running. Yes, Kyle Shanahan's a play caller, but Clay Kubiak helped set up that game plan and is a big voice in the room, and he was able to help keep that offense together for 5 or 6 weeks while Brock Purdy was hurt. He deserves a chance elsewhere to really shine as an offensive coordinator, and I think give him 2 years, he'll be in coaching discussions in 2028 to be a head coach if this is the type of move that happens for him. Aaron White-Cotton is a defensive coordinator. Aaron White-Cotton, he served as Saleh's D-line coach in New York and in San Francisco before he got hired. He's currently the D-line coach in Dallas, where he's really done a great job replacing Parsons with Sam Williams, with Donovan Ezeraku, with a patchwork defensive edge room. They've done a pretty good job. They currently rank 3rd in tackles as an edge rushing group and middle of the pack in sacks, in spite of poor talent and just rookies. And I think Aaron White-Cotton, again, was the D-line coach in New York with Robert Saleh, and before New York, he was his D-line coach in San Francisco. I think there's a great chance that Aaron White-Cotton could get poached to go with Robert Saleh again as a full-time defensive coordinator, because he's proven that in New York, in San Fran, and now in Dallas, that wherever he goes, better guys play better. And then Dan Shamash, the special teams coordinator. Shamash was the assistant special teams coach under Saleh and in control of game management in New York. So Saleh already trusts him because game management matters. That's the guys that say, hey, challenge that play. Hey, call a timeout at this time. He trusts Dan Shamash's opinion when it comes to that type of high pressure moments. So I think he would trust him to run their special teams unit. That's a lot of pressure, man, for Dan Shamash that Robert Saleh entrusted him with. I do think that Dan Shamash, if he goes, hey, Robert, I would love to follow you to Cincinnati, Robert Saleh would honor that because he would want him back in his ear. Then for the Ravens, Brian Flores, obviously as a head coach, Brian Angelicio as the offensive coordinator, Josh Boyer as the defensive coordinator, and Danny Crossman as a special teams assistant head coach. So Brian is the current pass game specialist for the Vikings alongside the tight ends coach. He has turned Josh Oliver into the best run blocking tight end, and he's had a lot of success with TJ Hawkinson. He's a big contributor to the great passing scheme they've had the last couple of years under multiple quarterbacks. Obviously, JJ McCarthy is an up and down second year player, so you can't really put a whole lot on him on that. because a lot of it is just generally McCarthy is playing under expectation. But Brian, whether it was Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, Sam Darnold, he has shown that as a pass game coordinator, he can really set up a good passing game plan to show out for a struggling quarterback. And I mean, we just saw the Vikings beat the Dallas Cowboys and knock them out of the playoffs. So maybe the last 3 or 4 weeks, we can see JJ McCarthy really become into his own, and they can feel comfortable going in the next season. But I would take Brian with me to the Ravens because I think he'd do an amazing job with Lamar Jackson. Next, we have Josh Boyer as a defensive coordinator. Josh is Brian's former DC under him in Miami. He hasn't coached in the NFL since Brian Flores was fired. He went back to college. He's currently on Ohio State staff, so I think he could easily jump back into the NFL and work again for Brian Flores as DC because they honestly liked each other. You know, he's very loyal to Brian Flores. The minute he got fired, he just went back to college. So I do think if Brian Flores is hired again, Josh Boyer would be one of the first calls that are made by Brian Flores. Then Danny Crossman. Danny was hired by Flores to be the special teams coach in Miami, and he's the only one who stayed once Brian was fired. I could see him wanting back under his wing in Baltimore, especially with the young guys like Tyler Loop and Jordan Stout, after he personally developed Jason Sanders and Matt Hack. That was a great special teams group in Miami during Brian Flores' time, and Danny Crossman was a big reason for that. One of the better field goal blocking units as well under Brian Flores' time. So I do think Danny Crossman is another guy that he would want to bring back onto his staff. And he hasn't really coached this year. I don't know where he's at. I tried to find him where he's at, but he got fired in 2024, got replaced, and hasn't really been back in the NFL since. I can't find anything about him. So I think Brian Flores can make that call, get him back into the NFL. And basically the only guy that they're changing out is Brian Angelicio. But again, Brian Flores is the head coach, defensive coordinator basically, and Josh Boyer is just his assistant at this point. So Brian is running the offense, and Brian Flores is running the defense. Next, these are the last 3 teams we want to talk about. The Cardinals, Clint Kubiak as the head coach, Andrew Janico as the offensive coordinator, Carl Scott as the defensive coordinator, and Nico Thorpe as a special teamer. So Clint Kubiak, obviously talked about him. Andrew Janico, though, is Clint's number 1 guy. Like, that's his number 1 guy he goes on to. Andrew has followed Clint nearly everywhere the last 6 years. He was his quarterback, wide receiver coach in Minneapolis, and in Saints, and with Seattle. So 3 of the last 5 years, he's been underneath Clint Kubiak as his direct number 2. It's his most trusted advisor on game plans. I think he can easily follow him to Arizona and get a promotion. He has shown success with Sam Darnold this year, with Spencer Rattler late last year after Carr's injury. I just think Andrew Janico, again, Clint Kubiak, it'll be a Clint Kubiak offense, but Andrew Janico can be his number 2 to implement that offense and be the voice in the quarterback's ear to be like, hey, you got this. Here's how Clint wants you to do this, while Clint manages the more big-scale offense. Andrew Janico could be the small-time, personal, one-on-one guy for their next quarterback. Carl Scott, the defensive coordinator. Carl has helmed this elite defensive back room over the last 4 years, over 2 coaching staffs. He's developed talents like Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, Nick Eamon-Warry, Devin Witherspoon. He was also actually on that 2021 Minnesota staff with Clint Kubiak, with Andrew Janico, so they know each other very well. Defensive pass game coordinator this year, and they have a top 7 unit in yards allowed. So Carl Scott knows what he's doing when it comes to the pass game, because not only is he their DB coach, he's also the pass game coordinator, and they're doing a good job in the secondary of holding guys from big games, basically. And again, Clint Kubiak, Andrew Janico, Carl Scott were all part of that 2021 Minnesota team where a lot of them got their first starts. So I think Clint Kubiak would bring Carl Scott along with them and coach one of the better units of Mike Macdonald's defense. Then Nico Thorpe, special team coordinator. Nico, very unknown. Obviously, he's only been a coach in the NFL in 3 years, but in the 3 seasons, he's become a defensive assistant coach and second in command on the special teams unit. So very quickly he's rising up the ranks. And I think Clint Kubiak, again, with his movement of him, Andrew, and Carl, I think Nico is another guy that he sees talent in and would want to bring with him to Arizona. Would be more of a risky move as he's so unproven as a coach, but as a player, he was a Seahawks special teams captain from 2016 to 2020. Was regarded as one of the best gunners in the league as well. When I read his name, I literally said out loud, I know that guy. How do I know that guy? Because he was one of the best gunners for 4 years. He was a special teams captain. Like, he bleeds Seattle. So there's a very good chance he could stay in Seattle for the culture. But if Clint Kubiak goes, hey, Nico, it's year 4 of you as a coach. I want you as my special teams coach already. I think Nico would fall into Arizona because that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. 4 years in, you're already a primary coordinator. That's a big jump. But I do think Clint Kubiak would take that risk on a guy like Nico Thorpe. Then for the Steelers, obviously Jesse Minter as a head coach, Sanjay Lal as offensive coordinator, Steve Clinkscale as defensive coordinator, and Chris Gould as a special teams coach. Sanjay has been a long-time wide receiver coach in the league. He's developed Quentin Johnson to become the wide receiver he is today, as he completely turned his career around. Made Ladd McConkey look amazing his rookie year. He's kind of had, a slower year too. But other breakout years include DJ Chark, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf. All those guys broke out underneath Sanjay Lal, so he's doing something right. So I think Jesse Minter would want to bring Sanjay Lal and be like, hey, you're doing a great job in LA. You're a very long-time NFL coach. I want your experience on the offside of the ball. And I think Sanjay would absolutely bite at the opportunity. Steve Clinkscale, newer coach of the league, but has been under Jesse Minter the entire time. He's currently the cornerback coach who turned Tariq Steele into a steal in the draft last year. Again, Jesse Minter's defense is Jesse Minter, but Steve Clinkscale has proven that he can make, water in the wine in LA. And I think Jesse Minter would want to bring that with him to the Steelers, especially with their DB experience. They have such an interesting DB room in Pittsburgh. I think Steve Clinkscale would love to get an opportunity to have Joey Porter in that room. Then Chris Gould, he's been a long-time assistant special team coach, and again, Minter has limited contact with coaches in the league, so I didn't see him taking guys from the LA Chargers staff. Chris Gould's currently there, Steve Clinkscale's currently there, Sanjay's currently there. Yes, Jesse Minter has experience in Baltimore and Michigan, but I think he wants as much NFL experience as possible to make the Steeler teams work. I think Sanjay, longtime NFL coach, Steve and Chris are there in LA, and Steve he brought up from college with them. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring those guys with him. Finally, with the Falcons, Mike Tomlin is a head coach, Zach Robinson is the offensive coordinator, Carl Dunbar is a defensive coordinator, and Danny Smith as a special teams coach. Zach is the current OC and has gotten a lot out of Bijan and Drake London. But again, Zach Robinson's hit or miss. He's underperforming this year, but I do think Mike Tomlin would value having a consistent voice for those two stars because you're going to lose Kyle Pitts. But Zach Robinson's getting a lot out of Kyle Pitts right now, and Bijan's having a great year. I think there is a world where Zach Robinson stays on as the OC to have a consistent voice for those young guys. And also on top of that, Mike Tomlin really likes underperforming OCs. So there's a good chance he stays because he's underperforming. Matt Canada, Arthur Smith won't fire him. So I think there's a good chance if he came to Atlanta, he'd say, Zach Robinson, 1 year ago, you were getting talked about a head coaching gig. You had a bad year. Come back and run it back, right? Run it back with Bijan, run it back with Drake London, run it back with Kirk / Michael Penix in this offensive line. Run it back because defensively, I'm gonna have this handled. Then Carl Dunbar is a defensive coordinator. Dunbar is a Pittsburgh longtime defensive line coach and has been fantastic for them. Their defensive line is always a strength of the Steelers, and Dunbar is a very big reason why. Consistently, it's a top 5 unit across the board in pressures, tackles, run stop rate, pressure rate, everything. So he gets a promotion. Obviously, he'd have to leave Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin, but he gets a promotion. He should have gone over Terrell Austin a few seasons ago because Terrell Austin is a bad defensive coordinator. Carl Dunbar is the biggest win of this roster is the defensive line. And Carl Dunbar, the defensive line coach, should have gotten promoted over Terrell Austin. So whatever. Not gonna get mad about it. He gets his chance now in Atlanta. I think that'd be fantastic for Atlanta to get him. For Jalen Walker, for James Pierce. Everyone would love that hire. I'm being serious. Then Danny Smith, in my opinion, is pound for pound the best special teams coach in the league, and he's been in Pittsburgh since 2014 under Mike Tomlin. He is old, so he could retire if Tomlin leaves, or he could stay in Pittsburgh because his family lives there for the last 10 to 12 years. But I do think if Mike Tomlin leaves and he asked Danny to follow him, he would follow him. Leads the league in blocked kicks, punts. They're top 5 in return yardage and kicks and punts. And he's been a consistent voice for Chris Boswell nearly his entire career. Danny Smith, I think no matter what, if Mike Tomlin leaves, he'll either retire or follow Mike Tomlin. Like, I just don't see a world because I think those two guys right here, Carl Dunbar and Danny Smith, are Mike Tomlin guys, and I think they're gonna follow him wherever he goes. And again, Zach Robinson, he's the already installed offensive coordinator for this team. Makes sense why they want to keep him. But yeah, so we're gonna go back over it one more time. For the Titans, I think Mike McCarthy makes a lot of sense, and that's his coordinators. For the Giants, Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Dolphins, and that's his staff. Robert Saleh would take over the Bengals, 49ers defensive coordinator, take over the Bengals head coaching gig. That's his coaching staff. The Ravens, I think Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, could take over as head coach. That'd be his coaching staff. Then for the Cardinals, I think Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, that could be a great fit for him, and that would be his coaching staff. The Steelers, Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Chargers, and that would be his coaching staff. And for the Falcons, I think Mike Tomlin would be an absolute home run hire, and that would be his coaching staff. If you guys enjoy, please like, comment, subscribe. I went in depth trying to break down if things were going to happen, who would hire who, where would this guy go. It took a lot of time, and I appreciate you guys watching this video. You have no idea. If you love these type of in-depth breakdowns and going deep dive into careers, let me know in the comments down below. Please leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you guys later. Peace and bye.